Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traversing the Stars podcast. Today's special guest is Rylend Grant. You know him as the writer of Fa Sheng Origins from Immortal Studios. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Grant. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Definitely my pleasure, sir. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comic books and who were your earliest influences?
What inspired my love for comic books? Man, I when I was really young, I had a babysitter who used to run a daycare at a bowling alley. This is a weird story. And so she would babysit me during the day, and then in the evening every Wednesday she had to go and run this daycare at the bowling alley. So I would come to the bowling alley with her, and she'd give me a roll of quarters, and I'd go and play the video games, Operation Wolf, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whatever. And there was a pro shop at the bowling alley that had like an auxiliary space that they rented out, and it would be something different every couple of months. They sold like soft tip darts there at one point. They sold, sports cards there one time. And so for a period of time, there was a comic shop in this bowling alley. And, it was, the first time I'd ever really wandered into a comic shop. And there was a really great, clerk there, the guy that ran the place. His name was Chris Webb. And, he was trying to find loyal customers and inspire people, and so he pointed me to some amazing things. And the first thing he ever pointed me to, I have it on the rack here but I can't find it, was this comic book called Reed Fleming, The World's Toughest Milkman. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
I highly recommend it. It's about this Bukowski-esque milkman. He delivers bottles of milk to people's homes, and in the first couple of pages he's driving his milk truck down the street, and he's drinking a bottle of rye whiskey, with the 3 X's on it, and swerving through traffic and causing all sorts of trouble. And he pulls up to this woman's house that he's supposed to be delivering the milk to. He drives right up on the lawn, tears the lawn up. He stumbles up to the door, and he's delivering her empty bottles of milk, and she's like, "I'm not paying that." And he gets in her face and he says, 75 cents or I piss in your flowers. And that was it. Like the comics had me after that. IDW published pretty recently like a full collection of Reed Fleming. I highly recommend that. But that was the first one. And then and then I found other comic shops, and it was always great comic clerks that really kind of brought me in. I got brought back into a comic shop again when Superman died, Death of Superman, like anyone else. And I was one of the boobs that showed up for that. But that got me into the shop again. But the Image Revolution was happening, right? And so there was that. And then again, a comic clerk is like, hey, read this, read that. And I had this preconception that it's like, okay, well, comics they're superheroes punching people and stuff like that, but there was so much more you could do with the medium. And it was, the Marvel made Iron Man an alcoholic, and in the 70s, like fucking earth shattering, right? Demon in Bottle was formative. And then a lot of those early Vertigo titles, Preacher was a huge deal for me. Those early Hellblazer comics. And they were grimy, and they were these kind of morality plays and these philosophical plays, and really kind of showed me what you could do with the medium. And so I think that now writing them myself, I'm always sort of aiming for that, right? What is it's bigger than the plot, and it's bigger than this guy's trying to take over the world and we're going to stop him. It's what is the psychology behind it? And what does a character have to overcome personally and internally before they can save the world or stop the missile from launching or whatever. So those are my primary comic inspirations.
Well, you named some great ones. I mean, Hellblazer was fantastic. Was there a
Yeah.
particular run? Was it Ennis? Was it Azraello? Who was your Hellblazer guy?
I mean, I worship at the altar of both Ennis and Azarello. So they were my. I mean, 100 Bullets is probably my favorite comic book of all time. So I'm a huge Azarello guy. But again, Preacher, Hitman, those were my. I was a huge Ennis guy. There was a Wizard at some point. Wizard magazine published this checklist that was current at the time of every Garth Ennis comic book ever printed. And at some point, I don't know, I had 95% of them or something like that. I set out to get them all, and they were hard to get, because it was like, because I mean, he started in the UK, right? And so it's like, so I'm on eBay tracking down old like war comics and old issues of 2000 AD and stuff like that. But yeah, those guys were it's the entire body of work, and again, it was so psychologically based and so twisted in a way and so grimy and I was coming of age and I'm wrestling with demons, and that was what you saw on those pages. That was interesting. And the 100 Bullets is so great because it's like, there you had these contained stories, with this new protagonist kind of every time they launched a new sort of series on it, but there was this bigger picture. Each was a puzzle piece that put together this beautiful picture in the end, and that sort of storytelling is something that I've carried with me. It's like, okay, well, we're building this really pretty small picture here, but it's actually a piece to a much larger picture, and it's just and to see how that comes together or doesn't after after 100 issues or whatever is really interesting.
To me, Vertigo, 90s Vertigo was definitely the golden age for me. I mean, I know golden age is technically the 40s, early 50s, but I think when you look at Vertigo in the 90s with the Sandman, the Preacher, 100 Bullets, moving into Fables and some of the others that they've done, that to me was just fantastic, because you had writers who they just said, write whatever you want to write for as long as you want to write it, and when you're done, and that was it. And some of those stories they walked away with were absolute genius.
Well, and it was do something that we haven't seen before. I mean, that was the biggest thing. It's it was the equivalent of I'm a film guy. I'm a film guy first. I wrote in last 15 years I've written in Hollywood for Luc Besson and J.J. Abrams and John Woo and Ridley Scott and on and on and on. So I'm a movie guy more than anything. But that Vertigo age that you're talking about is the equivalent of like the 90s Sundance movement, right? It's Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez and Richard Linklater, coming out and telling stories we haven't seen before with protagonists we haven't seen before, and telling them in a way that we haven't seen before. I mean, I think before this era you're talking about, there was a thing that a comic book was. Like you knew what you were getting into every time, right? You were there was this little sandbox that everybody was playing in, and every once in a while somebody stuck a toe outside of it, right? But and it was earth shattering. But all those guys, just said, fuck the sandbox. Like we're gonna take a running long jump out of the sandbox and see where we land. And it was awesome. And they are the reason that comics are what they are today, and that's they can be anything and everything, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, their whole point was complexity was okay. They gave permission for complexity in a way that comic books and many stories don't try to or afraid to. I think those Vertigo stories also didn't try to look for an audience. They were like, this is really good, the audience will find us. They weren't trying to market to any pop culture or any, they were good stories. They knew people would find them, and word of mouth would carry them through. And I don't think you get to make comic books like that anymore, because unfortunately Vertigo is toast.
Yeah, which is insane to me. Yeah, I mean the word we use in the film industry more than anything is tastemaker. They were like, okay, well, yeah, we're not gonna screw convention. Like we're gonna tell you what's good. and it's
Right.
going to be good because we put it out, right? It's HBO, you know. Vertigo was HBO. What HBO is to prestige television now. That's what Vertigo was to comics, and it's insane to me that there's no Vertigo anymore and that you can't make that work. And you know, again, it's like with, yeah, I mean, with as hard it is as it is to get a major publisher to you know, to go with your idea. It's weird that there's not somebody in there championing these stories right now.
I mean, I imagine that will, you know, be eventual. So I also read something else very fascinating about you. I read that you are an ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of questions on that. For someone who doesn't really know much about that.
Yeah.
First off, what does it mean to be an ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk, and what led you down the path?
Wow, we could do a whole podcast on that. So Soto Zen is a Japanese tradition. Buddhism moved from India. A guy named Bodhidharma brought it to China, and it mixed with the culture there and became something called Chan. Chan is the Chinese word for Zen, and spread through China. And then I don't know, about 800 years ago, a guy named Dogen crossed the East China Sea and learned Chan and brought it back to Japan, and founded the Soto school of Zen. And it changed a little bit. It kind of mixed with the sort of stoicism that was going on in Japan there, some of the culture. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what it means. It means that mostly it means that I meditate a lot, and that I teach other people to meditate. Um, so yeah, Soto Zen's amazing. I mean, it's it has more in common with science and physics than any religion I've ever encountered. I mean, there's a lot of different Buddhism out there, right? And the Buddhism that I've studied, a lot of it. I spent years as a Buddhist kind of nomad, going from tradition to tradition, and I traveled through Asia and experienced this and that and the other thing. And a lot of the Buddhism that you encounter in India, it does feel like a religion. And then there's wherever Buddhism would travel, it would kind of mix again with the culture. And so when it moved into moves into certain places, and it mixes with some mysticism. And so if you look at like Tibetan Buddhism, it feels like fucking Star Wars sometimes, but Japan at the time, it was a culture of realism, and so that's what, when Zen came there, it became about I don't know, repetition and sort of quietness and stoicism and stuff like that. And so yeah, so that's, I sort of fell in love with it, just a philosophy of life. It's about looking at the world the way it is and pulling all of the kind of bullshit psychology away from it. And it helped me a lot. I mean, I grew up in a housing project in Detroit, Michigan, and it was tough. And I had some really bad habits coming out of a place like that. And so when I first got to LA, I live in Los Angeles. I wasn't in a good place. And Zen meditation in general, it's about just kind of being quiet, watching yourself, getting to know yourself, seeing your habits. I saw, when I did that, when I stopped for the first time and really kind of took a look around at myself, at my life, and how I interacted with people, I didn't like what I saw. And Zen allowed me to see that and allowed me to change that. And so yeah, it's, I don't know, I meditate every day, twice a day for a half hour, and it's calmed me down a lot, and it's helped me sort through a lot of stuff. And so yeah, if you do it long enough, usually whoever you're learning from will tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, you should start teaching this to people, or whatever, if they want it. And so yeah, so a monk named Brad Warner, who has written some great Zen books, is maybe the biggest and baddest Zen author in the country. He ordained me, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and since then I've I lead meditation groups and I give some talks here and there, and I may or may not be writing a Zen book. We'll see how that shakes out. But
so it sounds like it's a lot. Not only why you got into Zen Buddhism, but the experience itself is a lot about understanding yourself, who you are as an individual. I wonder, does that help you as a writer to understand you first and where you come from before you write other characters?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have, because of my Zen work, kind of taken myself apart, put myself back together 100 times, and I've looked at how I do things and why I do things, and where the psychological roots of what I'm doing come from, and it's usually all the way, well, this thing happened when I was 4, and that's why I'm doing this now, in my 30s or whatever. Yeah, if you can start to think that way about the characters you're playing with, if you are just a student of psychology and of I don't know, human habit and human tendency, I think it really makes you interesting as a writer. I mean, you need something to say first and foremost. I've been through some shit. You need to have processed your shit to be able to write about it, I think. I mean, here's the thing, is like, writing is therapeutic for me, right? I mean, writing has always been about getting my demons in a room and beating the shit out of them, right? Or allowing them to beat the shit out of me. And a lot of times what I'm writing, I mean, it's heightened and it's twisted and all that stuff. I'm not some vigilante superhero that's going around killing bad guys, but you know what I mean? It's like I'm my demons are turned up to 10 and put to work in these stories. So there's that. And I mean, with Zen, I mean, a lot of the work is wrestling with these big, hairy existential questions. Who am I? What is this life all about? Time and space and past, present, and future, and all of these things. A lot of those big, hairy existential questions I'm putting to work in my in my comic books, in my movies, the whole 9 yards. And sometimes it's more veiled than others. In my early work, I mean, I'm doing really actiony stuff, so it's there. The philosophy is there, and the character exploration is there, but maybe those bigger questions aren't there. But then the last book I did, Suicide Jockeys from Source Point Press, I actually created with another ordained Soto Zen monk, and so he and I were purposely wrestling with these big, hairy existential questions, and it's a time travel deal, and so it lends itself to it. Okay, well, let's talk about how Zen looks at the fabric of time and past, present, and future, and all of these things. And then with the new book, Fa Sheng Origins, I mean, it's actually about it's about a Zen monk, and it's a different time and it's a different place that takes place at the Shaolin Temple in China during the Boxer Rebellion. But here's the thing: when you are ordained as a Zen monk, you are given a lineage chart. This is a tradition. This is a philosophy that is handed down generation by generation by generation. It's all been documented. And so as I was saying before, Buddhism comes from India. A guy named Bodhidharma brings it to China, and Bodhidharma actually is a character in Fa Sheng Origins as it progresses. And he brings it, when he brings it to China, he actually brings it to the Shaolin Temple, and it mixes with the culture there. And two things are founded. One, as I said, Chan Buddhism, the Chinese version of Zen, but then also Bodhidharma teaches the monks there, who are not in great shape, he teaches them physical exercises that eventually morphs into what we now know as Shaolin Kung Fu. And as I said, eventually this Dogen guy crosses the Eastern China Sea, picks up Chan and brings it to Soto Zen. And so on my lineage chart, I can actually go back person by person, and I can trace my lineage back to the Shaolin Temple.
Oh, that's cool.
To Dogen, to the Shaolin Temple, to Bodhidharma, all of these things. And so in writing that, I am actually going back and I'm exploring in a really interesting way a very special link in the chain of my spiritual tradition, right? And then when I'm set, and that story is actually, it is the story of the making of an arhat, which is an enlightened being. And so, so he is literally at a Zen temple, wrestling with the same exact questions, the existential questions. Who am I? What should I be doing? What is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What makes a good person? What makes a bad person? All of these things. He's wrestling with these same questions, and so so that is an on the nose version of what we're talking about. So yeah, like when it gets that intense, I'm almost teaching Zen with these things, right? In a thinly veiled way, whereas sometimes I'm just kind of slipping a fastball in here or there, but
so when you're choosing to write something, are you writing the idea first and molding around it a story, or do you come up with an interesting story and then you find ways to develop your ideas within it?
It's all over the map. You never know how one of these things is gonna come to life. I mean, I've been writing professionally for, I don't know, 16 plus years now. So film and TV stuff for 16 plus years, and then the comic stuff for, I don't know, better part of 5 at this point, I guess. And again, it's not something that I'm doing in my spare time, right? This is what I do all day, every day. And so, I've necessarily gotten good at bringing it together, and so it's weird. I mean, a lot of times it's something that somebody brings you, and most of my comic books, I came up with the Fa Sheng Origins thing. It was part of this bigger project, the Immortal Storyverse, that Peter Shao, sort of came up with, and it was based on, his father was one of the legendary like Wuxia novelists in the history of China. He wrote like 200 plus books, and so it was inspired by all this work that his father had done, and Peter's sort of bringing it to the world in a different way. So Peter brought me this thing that was he brought me this really well built foundation on which to build a story and a character play, right? So that was kind of easy. Peter had done a good part of the initial work. Sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a plot point, sometimes it's there are these seeds that you kind of water, and you see how they kind of grow. And so yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just it's to the point, I've done it long enough where it's like I sort of think in 3-act structure, right? So and I think in season-long arcs and all of these things, and so that makes it easier. I know what I need, and again, it's like you watch Top Chef, right? And it's like, okay, well, here are 3 elements, make a world-class dish out of it. You and I couldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like you and I, we probably have 3 dishes that we make really well or whatever, and that's it. But these people are world-class chefs that have all they've done is cook for 20 years, right? And they've seen every situation. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, you give me those 3 elements and I'll make something fucking amazing out of them, right? And so, like, to a certain degree, it's that. It's like, okay, well, you know what? I think I want to do a tokusatsu thing. Like, let's find something. And what do I have to say today? And what's going to make this character interesting and challenging? And all of those things. For me, usually it's a world that I fall in love with first and foremost. With Fa Sheng Origins, it was it's set. I mean, for obvious reasons, it appeals to me, right? It's at the Shaolin Temple. It's this specific link in my spiritual chain, but also it's set in China during the Boxer Rebellion and the warlord era that follows around 1900. It's a really turbulent, interesting, challenging time historically and geographically. And that was really interesting and really amazing to me. And so the first thing I did was just sort of just dive into the world and just gobble up all the history, and I'm falling in love with characters, and I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting piece, and that's an interesting piece. And again, you're kind of gathering puzzle pieces, right? And it sort of comes together organically and slowly but surely until it builds into this really rich world and stuff like that. I mean, the biggest example of that, one of the scripts that really broke me in Hollywood, it was a script called Ghost and the Wolf, and it was a kind of a Lethal Weapon-esque action joint about an Armenian Russian gang war in Los Angeles. And I didn't just Google that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you just Google it, like, they're going to be able to tell. And so I had a couple of friends that were able to introduce me to, the first guy was he was an Armenian bookie, with a lot of underworld ties, and the second person was a person who ran a Russian mafia contraband house. They sold cigarettes and vodka out of a house next to a preschool. I just met these guys, and sat in the contraband house for a couple of days, and sat in a coffee shop and watched this guy take bets for a couple of days, and then went to the bars and drank with them, and watched how these people talked and how they interacted and how they shook hands and how they settled little arguments and stuff like that. And that person rolled into this person, rolled into that person, until I had I fell in love with this world, with the people in it, with the way they interacted, and the way they did business and all of this stuff. And then it was like, okay, well, what story are we setting here now? I know the characters, I know the world backwards and forwards. And then when people read that script, it was like, it was a good action movie with intrigue, and it felt like a Hollywood movie. But more than anything, it was like, oh wow, like, we've never seen people talk and interact this way. Like, you can put a white glove on and you can like see the dust on the table, so it was all that stuff. It just really brought it to life. So for me, that's the biggest thing, is like, if I can't see it and taste it and touch it and smell it, then I don't know, I don't have any business writing in it. So give me the world, let me fall in love with the world, and then I'll find the story in it.
So, I mean, as you're saying with Fa Sheng Origins, I might have hopefully got the name right, pronounced it right.
Yeah.
Hey, points for me. Anyways, yeah. So when you're writing a book like that, and you're writing it, as you said, during the Boxer Rebellion in China, from my experience being in the United States, is that we're relatively ignorant of anything that happens outside the United States, or at least outside the West. Not only we're ignorant of it, but we also don't do a very good job of maybe empathizing with anything that doesn't happen directly to us.
Yeah.
So you're putting a story in a Boxer Rebellion in China. Which elements of the story would Western listeners connect with? Like, what is it that would speak to them about, and be able to help them to identify with the time period or those events?
It's all allegories for other things that are happening to us and for us. I mean, we're a country that is things have calmed down for us specifically, but we were at war for 20 years.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? We are completely divided as a country. Half of us lined up on this pole and the other half lined up on this pole.
Yep.
And we are constantly clashing and refuse to find middle ground, politically, socially, economically, all of these things. And that's what was going on in China then. These are universal things. Okay, well, there's war all around us. Our brothers are dying. Our sisters are being taken. One person feels that this is the only way out. The other person feels that this is the only way out, right? And so these are all universal themes. I mean, they tie right back to what's going on now. I mean, I'm writing from the perspective of here and now. And really, it's a coming of age story. It's about Fa Sheng, this one man trying to find his way in the right way, against all odds, right? And I think we can all, it's my story in a way. I mean, I grew up in a housing project in Detroit, and I fought my way the fuck out of there. and it took a toll, and I had to untie all those knots and, I don't know, become better and figure out how it was going to positively affect the world. And I think we all have our version of that story, and this is one man's version of that story. It just so happens that it's heightened, again, it's told, against the backdrop of the Boxer Rebellion. This guy is he is a magical martial warrior. He's a kung fu master. So there's a lot of that. I mean, you can say that with anything, I mean, I am not I'm not a Russian mafioso, right? I am not a CIA operative. I am not a firefighter. I am not but if you do it right, you put the audience in those shoes. And I think that's interesting. But I mean, you're hinting at something else, where it's like writing for another time and writing about another culture. It's such a titanic responsibility, right, to get it right and to do it justice. And I mean, I was less concerned about doing right by the American white person audience than I was the huge Chinese audience that should and will see this, right, because it's their culture. And so you do that very carefully, and it helps that we have Asian artist, Asian colorist. It helps that Immortal Studios is it is a company run by really thoughtful Chinese Americans, and they are a constant resource, right? I'm checking with them 100 times a day, being like, is this right? How is this? What is the way to do this and to honor this culture in the right way? And it helps, of course, that again, I mean, 20 years of Zen practice, right? Of all sorts, and that means studying Chan and studying all sorts of Zen, and traveling through there, and just having a sense of it, and knowing how hard it is to get right, and the care that it takes and the respect that it takes. And so that's really what I was worried about.
So in the press release for the story, it states that events caused Fa Sheng to reevaluate his purpose in life and dedicate himself to helping people. So why is it how's it important that he kind of reestablishes his priorities? Because also there's a quote that also says, you're not born to enlightenment, it is earned, right?
Yeah.
So what is it that affects him that way to readjust his priorities in that way? And is it about the difference between looking internally versus looking externally at the world?
Yeah, I that's exactly what it is. It's I mean, he's used as a pawn early on without giving too much away. I mean, it's the Boxer uprising. It was, like I said, it was this turbulent time, and you had the imperial army, using the common man and woman. You had the boxers using the common man and woman. You had a handful of people that were moving everyone else around like pawns on a chessboard, right? And people were currency, and people were cannon fodder, and all of these things. And so Fa Sheng in the beginning spends a lot of time as a pawn, right? And it goes very poorly for him, and the people he's close to end up dead because of it, or worse. And he spends a lot of time fighting for the wrong people and the wrong cause, and after being put through the meat grinder of the Boxer Rebellion, of the warlord era that follows in China, the questions he's wrestling with the entire time is, who and what should I be fighting for, right? And he thinks that it becomes this binary thing, right? It's like, well, I have to fight for these people, or I have to fight for these people. I have to pick a dog in this race, and the the insight at the end ends up being, like, well, nobody's fighting for these people. Nobody's fighting for the pawns. Nobody's fighting to free the pawns, to give the pawns agency. And that's what he ends up doing. And again, you talk about like, why is this relevant today? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can go your own way, right? Like we don't have to serve these masters. These, the our entire political system, our entire social system is just, it's based on these binary choices. Well, you're a 1 or a 0. It's black or it's white. Choose. And life is a lot more complicated than that, a lot more interesting than that, right? Life is about gray area decision making, really. And that's what he's about. It's about sort of shattering, that facade, that nonsense, that spell that we're all under, that we have to choose this or this. There's this other way to go, and it's better for everybody, and we can work together, and we can, fight the man and all that, good stuff. But
so Fa Sheng is also is already an active Kickstarter campaign right now, and I remember correctly, it has already passed its goal and is doing quite well. So what is the key to the success of the Kickstarter? How have you guys managed to get this much attention to an indie book, which, as we all know, is exceedingly hard to do, is to bring attention to a any indie book?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like the people involved, first of all. I mean, Peter Shao, the guy that runs Immortal Studios, his great, he's a very talented man and has a pretty intense skill set. But I think the best thing you can say about a leader is that they hire well. And Peter has brought an incredible team together. And so, he has Hank Canals and Brian Cunningham are kind of behind the scenes, the editors, they're kind of running the show there. And so they're orchestrating something pretty amazing. They brought on Superfan Promotions, and they were doing a great job of kind of, riling up the press. I mean, they probably brought you on. And so, I mean, having like a first-class PR firm kind of behind it, that helps a lot. I mean, he brought me on, and I have this is not the first, Kickstarter dance I've done. I did 3 on my own that did really well. 2 issues of a astral projection throw called The Jump, and 1 campaign on something called The Peacekeepers, which is kind of a Fargo-esque crime drama. But I was bringing a Kickstarter fan base specifically with me, not to mention just my general fan base from the comic shops. This is not the first Immortal Studios Kickstarter. This is the 3rd or the 4th, I can't remember. But so they have already built a name on Kickstarter, and they've done quality books, and so people know that when they see Immortal Studios, that they're going to get something good and great. And then that'll get people on the page, but then you got to sell the book. And I think more than anything is the book is just good. The preview is awesome, and the book is about something. It's so I think that is a potent cocktail. It's not. I don't think that there's not any one thing that sort of brings you over the edge. I mean, if we're going to talk about Zen, there's this metaphor that gets used in Zen a lot, that enlightenment, it never hits you like a bucket of water. That's what people think, right? It's like you wake up one day, you get hit with a bucket of water, and then you're just enlightened, right? But it is said that enlightenment comes very slowly. It's almost like walking through fog. You are getting wet slowly but surely, but you're not even noticing it. And then at some point you just kind of look down and you're soaked, right? And that's how I think that this whole thing was built. It was built, a drop of fog at a time, and we are soaked now thanks to the work of many. Yeah.
So when does the campaign for the comic book end?
Well, I don't know when this is going to air. It is a week. I think we have 7 days left.
7 days?
Yeah.
Well, then I'll definitely be dropping it this week.
Okay.
Cool. to make sure it makes it for Kickstarter. Yeah. It kind of loses this value in 2 weeks. So So now just in time.
Yeah. So you have a couple of days to head over to Kickstarter and search for Fa Sheng Origins and grab it.
So is this a mini series? Is this an ongoing series? Is it built around a larger tapestry of story of the company? How does this work?
Yeah, so this first arc of Fa Sheng Origins is it's 6 issues, um, and it is part of a larger tapestry, as you said, something called the Immortal Storyverse. So Immortal's other books, the first is a book called The Adept, which Fa Sheng is actually a sort of supporting character in that book. And my book is the book that kind of takes you back and shows you who he is and where he's come from and all of that stuff. And then there's another book called The Immortal Swordsman. And yeah, they all intertwine, sort of like the Marvel movies do, but it is this cool, Wuxia magical martial warrior epic universe, a bunch of, crouching tiger, hidden dragon-esque fun. So yeah, it's cool, and it's very rewarding. I mean, you read one book and then you'll understand the next book better. You don't need to know all the books to you can get this one without knowing the other ones, but if you read them all, they really interact in a really interesting way, in a rewarding way. And I think that it's a big part of Peter's genius in terms of weaving this thing together, right? They stand really well on their own, but so much more interesting and interactive if you kind of read the whole lot. So,
well, like I said, it sounds like a fascinating comic book. I'm definitely interested in it. Once again, it not only, I mean, the time period sounds fascinating, but I do like stories that do deal with bigger ideas. It sounds like this one does. Especially, I have faith in that you put bigger ideas in your comic books just from talking to you a little bit. So yeah, no. What else can the listeners look forward to from you coming up?
From me, yeah, that's a good question. I am in. You'll have 5 more issues of Fa Sheng Origins here, and then I'm finding homes for stuff right now. Talking with both IDW and Aftershock about stuff and nailing that down. You will very soon see new issues of the Peacekeepers again, which is kind of my Fargo-esque crime drama, and of the Jump, my astral projection thriller. You can actually go, if you go to my backer kit store, the jump2.backerkit.com. That's the Jump, one word, and the number 2, the jump2.backerkit.com. You can actually find the Peacekeepers and the Jump. And it's kind of a cool one-stop Rylend Grant shop. It's you'll find autograph versions and sort of rare con variants of all my comic shop books, Aberrant, Banjax, Suicide Jockeys. So there's all that stuff, and then a lot of stuff on the movie horizon. I mean, later this year, I have a really cool kind of sci-fi joint, this sort of psychological, mindfuck sort of thing, starring Emil Hirsch, called State of Consciousness. That'll
Very cool.
see theaters later this year. I have a sort of psychological thriller starring Matt Dillon that is being directed by Fernando Trueba, who is a Spanish director who won the Oscar for foreign language film a few years back with Bella Poke. And so that shoots in Greece in the fall. I'm actually headed to Greece in like 2 weeks to do all the prep for it. Pretty exciting. Have another film shooting in Germany with Uli Adel, who he won an Oscar for a film called Bader Meinhof Complex. He's a German director, and was nominated for a couple others, and so that's great. And then sold a TV show to Lionsgate with Daveed Diggs from Hamilton, and he's the lead in Snowpiercer. And we have Emmy Raver Latman from Umbrella Academy, and Rafael Casal from Blind Spotting. So great cast, and so that's we're trying to figure out when the actors can get together. That may kind of start shooting by the end of the year, may not, getting 3 actors like that together, but the show's a go. And that's kind of a big John Wicky action joint that is actually kind of a modern take on the Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, very cool. I love that book.
Yeah, it's almost like, if Michael Mann did a Count of Monte Cristo today, that's sort of the take on that. But yeah, that'll be kind of probably an 8-episode mini, depending on what the order from the network ends up being. But we're still working all that out. But they may say they want 10. They may, who knows. But so yeah, that's the thing is it's actually it's getting harder to do the comic stuff right now because the film TV stuff is so heated up. But a lot of stuff going on.
Well, I hope as these projects get ready for release, come back on the show. I look forward to talking to you about all the.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it was a good chat. Thanks, man. Yeah, you too.